Well, let's talk about legalese because you mentioned that as an exception. We're just taking tangent upon tangent. That's an interesting one. You give it as an exception.
It's an exception.
That you say that most natural languages, as we've been talking about, have local dependencies, with one exception, legalese.
That's right.
So what is legalese, first of all?
Oh, well, legalese is what you think it is. It's just any legal language.
I actually know very little about the kind of language that lawyers use.
So I'm just talking about language in laws and language in contracts.
Got it.
So the stuff that you have to run into, we have to run into every other day or every day, and you skip over because it reads poorly, or partly it's just long, right? There's a lot of text there that we don't really want to know about, and so. But the thing I'm interested in, so I've been working with this guy called Eric Martinez, who is he was a lawyer who was taking my class. I was teaching a psycholinguistics lab class, and I have been teaching it for a long time at MIT. And he was a law student at Harvard, and he took the class because he had done some linguistics as an undergrad, and he was interested in the problem of why legalese sounds hard to understand. Why, and so why is it hard to understand, and why do they write that way if it is so hard to understand? It seems apparent that it's hard to understand. The question is, why is it? And so we didn't know, and we did an evaluation of a bunch of contracts. Actually, we just took a bunch of sort of random contracts because I don't know, there's contracts and laws might not be exactly the same, but contracts are kind of the things that most people have to deal with most of the time. And so that's kind of the most common thing that that adults in our industrialized society have to deal with a lot. And so that's what we pulled, and we didn't know what was hard about them, but it turns out that the way they're written is very center embedded, has nested structures in them. So it has low frequency words as well. That's not surprising. Lots of texts have it does have slightly lower frequency words than other kinds of control text, even sort of academic text. Legalese is even worse. It is the worst that we were able to find.
You just revealed a game that lawyers are playing.
They're
optimizing a different. Well,
it's interesting. That's now you're getting at why, and I don't think so. Now you're saying they're doing it intentionally. I don't think they're doing it intentionally. But let's. It's
an emergent phenomenon. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. And so, but we wanted to see why. So we see what first, as opposed. So because it turns out that we're not the first to observe that legalese is weird. Like back to Nixon had a Plain Language Act in 1970, and Obama had one, and a lot of these, a lot of presidents have said, "Oh, we've got to simplify legal language, must simplify it." But if you don't know how it's complicated, it's not easy to simplify it. You need to know what it is you're supposed to do before you can fix it, right? And so you need a psycholinguist to analyze the text and see what's wrong with it before you can fix it. You don't know how to fix it. How am I supposed to fix something I don't know what's wrong with it? And so what we did was that's what we did. We figured out, we just took a bunch of contracts, had people, and we encoded them for a bunch of features. And so another feature one of them was center embedding. And so that is basically how often a clause would intervene between a subject and a verb, for example. That's one kind of a center embedding of a clause, okay? And turns out they're massively center embedded. So I think in random contracts and in random laws, I think you get about 70% or 70% of sentences have a center embedded clause in them, which is insanely high. If you go to any other text, it's down to 20% or something. It's so much higher than any control you can think of, including people think technical academic text. No, people don't write center embedded sentences in technical academic text. I mean, they do a little bit, but it's on the 20%, 30% realm as opposed to 70. And so there's that, and there's low frequency words. And then people, maybe it's passive. People don't like the passive. Passive, for some reason, the passive voice in English has a bad rap, and I'm not really sure where that comes from. And there is a lot of passive in there's much more passive voice in legalese than there is in other texts.
Passive voice accounts for some of the low frequency words.
No. Those are separate. Those are separate.
Oh, so passive voice sucks.
These are
low frequency words sucks.
Well, sucks is different. So these are different.
That's a judgment. I'm
passive. Drop the judgment. It's just these are frequent. These are things which happen in legalese text. Then we can ask. Yeah. The dependent measure is how well you understand those things with those features. Yes. Okay, and so then it turns out the passive makes no difference. So it has a zero effect on your comprehension ability, on your recall ability. No, nothing at all. That has no effect. the words matter a little bit. They do. Low frequency words are going to hurt you in recall and understanding. But what really hurts is the center embedding. That kills you. That slows people down. That makes them very, very poor at understanding. That makes them they can't recall what was said nearly as well. And we did this not only on lay people. We did it on a lot of lay people. We ran it on 100 lawyers. We recruited lawyers from a wide range of sort of different levels of law firms and stuff, and they have the same pattern. So they also, when they did this, I did not know what would happen. I thought maybe they could process. They're used to legalese. They could process it just as well as if it was normal. No, they're much better than lay people. So they can much better recall, much better understanding, but they have the same main effects as lay people, exactly the same. So they also much prefer the non-center. So we constructed non-center embedded versions of each of these. Mm-hmm. We constructed versions which have higher frequency words in those places, and we unpassivized. We turned them into active versions. The passive active made no difference. The words made a little difference, and the uncenter embedding makes big differences in all the populations.
Uncenter embedding. How hard is that process, by the way?
Not very hard.
Sorry, dumb question, but how hard is it to detect center embedding?
Oh, easy to detect.
You're just looking at long dependencies, or is there a real?
You can. So there's automatic parsers for English, which are pretty good. And
they can detect center embedding.
Oh yeah. Very,
I guess nesting.
Perfectly. Yeah, pretty much.
So you're not just looking for long dependencies; you're just literally looking for center embed.
Yeah, we are in these cases. But long dependencies they're highly correlated. These kinds of this.
So like a center embedding is a big bomb you throw inside of a sentence that just blows up that makes super.
Can I read a sentence for you
Sure.
from these things? I see. I mean, this is just like one of the things this is just typical.
My eyes might glaze over in mid sentence. No, I understand that. I mean, legalese is hard.
This is it goes. In the event that any payment or benefit by the company, all such payments and benefits, including the payments and benefits under Section 3A hereof, being hereinafter referred to as a total payment, would be subject to the excise tax, then the cash severance payments shall be reduced. So that's something we pulled from a regular text, from a contract.
Wow.
And the center embedded bit there is just, for some reason, there's a definition. They throw the definition of what payments and benefits are in between the subject and the verb. How about don't do that?
Yeah.
How about put the definition somewhere else as opposed to in the middle of the sentence? And so that's very, very common, by the way. That's what happens. You just throw your definitions, you use a couple words, and then you define it, and then you continue the sentence. Just don't write like that. And you ask, so then we asked lawyers, we thought, oh, maybe lawyers like this. Lawyers don't like this. They don't like this. They don't want to write like this. We asked them to rate materials which are with the same meaning, with uncenter embedded and center embedded, and they much preferred the uncenter embedded versions.
On the comprehension, on the reading side.
Yeah, well, we asked them, would you hire someone who writes like this or this? We asked them all kinds of questions, and they always preferred the less complicated version, all of them. So I don't even think they want it this way.
Yeah, but how did it happen?
How did it happen? That's a very good question. And the answer is, I still don't know. But
I have some theories.
Well, our best theory at the moment is that there's actually some kind of a performative meaning in the center embedding, in the style, which tells you it's legalese. We think that that's the kind of a style which tells you it's legalese. It's a reasonable guess. And maybe it's just, so for instance, if you're it's like a magic spell. So we kind of call this the magic spell hypothesis. So when you tell someone to put a magic spell on someone, what do you do? People know what a magic spell is, and they do a lot of rhyming. That's kind of what people will tend to do. They'll do rhyming, and they'll do sort of like some kind of poetry kind of thing.
Abracadabra type of thing.
Exactly, yeah. And maybe there's a syntactic sort of reflex here of a magic spell, which is center embedding. And so that's it's trying to tell you this is something which is true, which is what the goal of law is, right? Is telling you something that we want you to believe as certainly true, right? That's what legal contracts are trying to enforce on you, right? And so maybe that's like a form which this is like an very abstract form, center embedding, which has a meaning associated with it.
Well, don't you think there's an incentive for lawyers to generate things that are hard to understand.
That was one of our working hypotheses. We just couldn't find any evidence of that.
No, lawyers also don't understand it.
Well,
But
we
you're creating
asked lawyers.
space. Why you self? I mean, you ask in a communist Soviet Union, the individual members, their self-report is not going to correctly reflect what is broken about the gigantic bureaucracy that then leads to Chernobyl or something like this. I think the incentives under which you operate are not always transparent to the members within that system.
Yeah.
So like it just feels like a strange coincidence that like there is benefit if you just zoom out and look at the system as opposed to asking individual lawyers, that making something hard to understand is going to make a lot of people money.
Yeah.
Like you're going to need a lawyer to figure that out, I guess, from the perspective of the individual. But then that could be the performative aspect. It could be as opposed to the incentive driven to be complicated. It could be performative to where we lawyers speak in this sophisticated way and you regular humans don't understand it, so you need to hire a lawyer. Yeah, I don't know which one it is, but it's suspicious. Suspicious that it's hard to understand and that everybody's eyes glaze over and they don't read.
I'm suspicious as well. I'm still suspicious. And I hear what you're saying. It could be kind of no individual, and even average of individuals, it could just be a few bad apples in a way, which are driving the effect in some way.
Influential bad apples at the sort of that everybody looks up to, or whatever. They're like central figures in how
But it is kind of interesting that among our 100 lawyers, they did not share.
They didn't want this. That's fascinating.
They really didn't like it, and so it
and
gave
they weren't
us
better than regular people at comprehending it, or they were on average better,
but they had the same difference.
The same difference.
Exact same difference. So they wanted it fixed. So they also, and so that gave us hope that because it actually isn't very hard to construct a material which is uncenter embedded and has the same meaning, it's not very hard to do. You just basically in that situation, you're just putting definitions outside of the subject-verb relation in that particular example. And that's pretty general. What they're doing is just throwing stuff in there, which you didn't have to put in there. There's extra words involved. Typically, you may need a few extra words sort of to refer to the things that you're defining outside in some way, because if you only use it in that one sentence, then there's no reason to introduce extra terms. But so we might have a few more words, but it'll be easier to understand. So I mean, I have hope that now that maybe we can make legalese less convoluted in this.
So maybe the next president of the United States can, instead of saying generic things, say
exactly.
I ban center embeddings and make Ted the language czar of the United States.
Eric. Okay. Martinez is the guy you should really put in there. Yeah. I mean,
But center embeddings are the bad thing to have.
That's right.
So if you get rid of that,
that'll do a lot of it. That'll fix a lot.
That's fascinating.
Yeah,
that is so fascinating.
Yeah.
And it is really fascinating on many fronts that humans are just not able to deal with this kind of thing, and that language, because of that, evolved in the way it did. It's fascinating.